The transport shuttle landed with a soft thud on the metal floor of the docking bay. The doors opened slowly, and bright white light flooded inside. Captain Park picked up his small bag and stepped out onto the deck of the Eternal Vanguard, the most famous military training station in the entire galaxy. He stopped and looked around. The station was huge. The ceiling was so high that he could barely see it. Hundreds of alien soldiers walked in every direction. Some were tall with 4 arms. Some had insect-like bodies with many legs. Others floated above the ground without any legs at all. Had seen pictures of alien species before, but seeing them in person was different. He felt very small. A deep voice called out to him, "Human, come here." Turned and saw a massive creature walking toward him. The alien stood over 7 feet tall. His body was covered in dark green scales that looked like armor. He had 4 muscular arms and eyes that glowed with a soft red light. This was one of the most powerful warrior species in the galaxy. "I am Commander," the alien said. His voice came through a small device on his chest that translated his words into English. "I am in charge of this station. You must be the human they sent us." Bowed his head politely. "Yes, Commander. My name is Park. Thank you for accepting me into the training program." Looked down at him with an expression that was hard to read. His red eyes moved slowly over his body, studying him like a scientist studying a small insect. "So this is what humanity offers us," said. He did not sound impressed. "You are small. You have no claws, no scales, no natural weapons of any kind. Your bones break easily. Your skin tears like paper." Behind, a group of soldiers had gathered to watch. They whispered to each other and laughed quietly. Could feel their eyes on him, judging him, finding him weak. One of the soldiers stepped forward. She was female, slightly smaller than but still much taller than. Her scales were a lighter shade of green, and she carried herself with confidence. "I am Lieutenant," she said. "I will be your training supervisor. You will follow my orders without question. You will train when I say train. You will eat when I say eat. You will sleep when I say sleep. Is that understood?" "Yes, Lieutenant," replied calmly. Studied his face for a moment. She seemed to be looking for fear, but she found none. This confused her slightly, but she pushed the thought away. "Good," she said. "Follow me. I will show you to your quarters." As followed through the station, he kept his eyes forward and his expression neutral. But inside his mind, he was watching everything. He noticed the security cameras on the walls. He counted the guards at each doorway. He memorized the layout of the corridors. This was what he had been trained to do for 15 years in the Korean Special Forces. What the aliens did not know was that was not really a simple recruit. He was one of Earth's most skilled soldiers. He had fought in jungles, deserts, and frozen mountains. He had survived situations that would have killed most men. But his file had been changed before he came here. All his records had been erased. As far as the Coalition knew, he was just a civilian consultant with basic military training. This was not an accident. Earth's leaders had done this on purpose. Humanity was new to the galactic community. They had only discovered faster-than-light travel 40 years ago. To the ancient species of the Coalition, humans were like children who had just learned to walk. They were not taken seriously. Earth's leaders wanted to know how the Coalition really treated its weaker members. They wanted to see if the aliens were fair and honorable, or if they were bullies who only respected strength. So they sent to be their eyes and ears. They told him to act weak. They told him to let the aliens underestimate him. They told him to watch and learn. And when the time was right, they told him to show them what a human could really do. Stopped in front of a small door. "This is your room," she said. "It is the smallest quarters on the station. Normally we give it to maintenance workers, but we thought it would be suitable for you." Some of the soldiers behind her laughed. Looked at the tiny room. It was barely big enough for a bed and a small table. The walls were bare metal. There was no window, no decoration, nothing comfortable at all. "It is perfect," said with a small smile. "I have slept in much worse places." Raised what might have been an eyebrow. "Is that so?" "Yes," said. "On Earth, I once spent 3 weeks sleeping in a hole in the ground during monsoon season. Another time, I slept on a frozen mountain with no tent and no fire. Compared to those places, this room is like a luxury hotel." For a brief moment, something flickered in his eyes. Was it curiosity? Interest? But it disappeared quickly, replaced by her usual cold expression. "Training begins tomorrow at dawn," she said. "Do not be late. Do not tolerate weakness or laziness." "I understand," said. Turned and walked away. The other soldiers followed her, still laughing and whispering about the weak little human. Stepped into his tiny room and closed the door. He sat down on the hard bed and let out a slow breath. Then, for the first time since he arrived, he allowed himself to smile. They thought he was weak. They thought he was a joke. They had no idea what he was capable of, and that was exactly what he wanted. In the Korean Special Forces, there was an old saying, "The nail that sticks up gets hammered down." It meant that showing off your strength too early was dangerous. It made you a target. The smart soldier waited. He watched. He learned his enemy's weaknesses. And when the perfect moment came, he struck fast and hard before anyone knew what was happening. Had been playing this game for a long time. He was very, very good at it. Tomorrow, the training would begin. Tomorrow, the aliens would test him and mock him and try to break him. They would push him to his limits and laugh when he fell. But would not break. He would bend. He would stumble. He would look weak and helpless. And all the while he would be watching them, studying them, learning everything he could. And when the time came, they would learn the truth about humanity. They would learn that humans were not weak at all. They were patient. 3 weeks had passed since arrived at the station, and he had become the biggest joke in the entire facility. Every day was the same. He woke up before dawn, put on his training uniform, and walked to the training hall where hundreds of alien soldiers were already waiting. And every day they laughed at him. The strength tests were the worst. The soldiers could lift massive metal blocks that weighed over 500 kilograms. They threw them around like toys. When it was his turn, he struggled to lift even 100 kilograms. The aliens roared with laughter. "Look at him," shouted Sergeant, a veteran with one missing eye. "He shakes like a newborn. My infant daughter is stronger than this human." The speed tests were no better. Though an insect-like species with 6 legs and 2 arms could run so fast they became blurs of motion. They moved through obstacle courses in seconds, took minutes. He stumbled. He fell. He finished last every single time. In tactical simulations, his ideas were ignored before he could even finish speaking. "Maybe we should try approaching from the west," he suggested once during a battle planning session. "The enemy would not expect." "Silence," Commander interrupted. "We do not need advice from a species that still fights wars over land and water. They have been conquering star systems since before your ancestors climbed down from the trees." More laughter, always more laughter. After one particularly bad training session, sat alone in the mess hall, eating his nutrient paste. The paste was gray and tasteless, designed to provide basic nutrition for many different species. It was not meant to be enjoyed. A shadow fell over his table. He looked up and saw Chitter, a young soldier. Unlike the others, Chitter had never mocked him. His compound eyes studied with what might have been sympathy. "May I sit?" Chitter asked. His voice was high-pitched and clicking, but the translator made it understandable. "Of course," said. Chitter sat down across from him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "I do not understand why you stay," Chitter finally said. "The others will never respect you. They see you as entertainment, a pet, something to laugh at when they are bored." Took another bite of his paste and chewed slowly. "Do you think the same?" Chitter's antennae twitched nervously. "I do not know what to think. You are strange. different from what I expected humans to be." "What did you expect?" Anger, Chitter said. "Pride. I expected you to fight back against their insults, to demand respect. That is what any would do. That is what any would do, but you just accept it. You smile and bow and say yes, sir, and no, sir, as if their words do not hurt you at all." Smiled slightly. "Maybe their words do not hurt me." "That is impossible," Chitter said. "Everyone has pride. Everyone feels pain when they are mocked." "You are right," admitted. "But there are different kinds of strength. The belief that strength means muscles and claws and roaring at your enemies. The belief that strength means speed and numbers. But humans believe something different." "What do humans believe?" Looked at Chitter with calm, steady eyes. "We believe that true strength is control. Control over your emotions. Control over your reactions. Control over yourself. A human who cannot control his anger is weak, no matter how strong his body is. A human who lets insults affect him gives power to his enemies." Chitter considered this for a long moment. "That is a strange way of thinking." "Perhaps," said, "but it has kept my people alive for a very long time." Across the mess hall, Sergeant was watching them. He did not like seeing the talking to the human. He stood up and walked over to their table, followed by 3 of his friends. Chitter growled, "Why are you wasting time with this creature? Do you want to become as weak as him?" Chitter's antennae flattened against his head in fear. "No, Sergeant, I was just leaving, finished. Go now." Chitter looked at with apology in his eyes, then quickly away. Sat down heavily in the seat Chitter had left empty. "Human," he said, leaning forward until his face was very close to us. "I do not know why the Coalition agreed to let your pathetic species into this program, but I want you to know something. You do not belong here. You will never belong here. You are a mistake." Met his gaze without flinching. "I understand your feelings, Sergeant." "Do you?" Laughed. "I doubt it. Let me make it clearer. Perhaps you should go back to tend to your farms, raise your children, leave warfare to species that were built for it." The entire mess hall had gone quiet. Everyone was watching, waiting. Put down his spoon and looked at for a long moment. Then, very slowly, he smiled. "Thank you for your advice, Sergeant," he said politely. "I will consider it carefully." Blinked. He had expected anger. He had expected fear. He had not expected this calm, empty response. It frustrated him. "You are either very stupid," said slowly, "or very brave. I cannot tell which." "Perhaps I am both," replied. Stared at him for another moment, then stood up and walked away, his friends following behind him. The mess hall slowly returned to normal, but could feel many eyes still watching him. Later that night, Lieutenant sat alone in her quarters, reviewing the training data from the past 3 weeks. Something was bothering her about the human, and she could not figure out what it was. She watched recordings of his failed tests over and over again. She studied his movements, his reactions, his expressions, and slowly a strange pattern began to appear. Every time he failed in exactly the same way. His mistakes were too consistent, too controlled. When he dropped weights, he dropped them at the same angle every time. When he fell during obstacle courses, he fell in the same position every time. His heart rate never spiked. His stress hormones remained perfectly stable. This was not a man who was trying and failing. This was a man who was failing on purpose. But why? What was he hiding? Closed the data files and sat back in her chair, thinking. She had been a soldier for 40 years. She had seen many things. She had learned to trust her instincts. And her instincts were telling her that there was much more to this human than anyone realized. She just had to figure out what it was. The alarm started screaming at 3 in the morning. Was awake instantly. Years of military training had taught his body to go from deep sleep to full alertness in less than 2 seconds. He was already putting on his boots when the emergency broadcast came through the station speakers. All combat personnel report to the central command room immediately. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. He ran through the corridors, passing dozens of other soldiers who were also rushing toward the command center. The red emergency lights made everything look like it was covered in blood. When he arrived, Commander was standing at the front of the room, his face grim. Around him, holographic screens showed images of a dark corridor filled with something that looked like black oil. 30 minutes ago, our quarantine sector was breached, announced. His voice was heavy. A hollow swarm has entered the station. Gasps filled the room. Looked around and saw fear on faces that had never shown fear before. Even Sergeant's face had gone pale. The hollow swarm had read about them in Earth's intelligence files. They were the most feared creatures in the galaxy. They were not alive in the normal sense. They were more like a disease, a collection of microscopic organisms that worked together like a single mind. They consumed organic matter, absorbed it into themselves, and grew larger. Weapons did not work against them. Plasma fire only made them stronger. They could not be killed, only contained. And now they were loose in the station. 36 soldiers are trapped in Sector 7, continued. Their weapons are useless. They have barricaded themselves in a supply room, but the swarm is eating through the walls. They have maybe 20 minutes before the barrier fails. He looked around the room. I need volunteers for a rescue team. I will not lie to you. This mission is extremely dangerous. Many of you will probably die, but those soldiers are our brothers and sisters. We cannot abandon them. Every hand in the room went up. Every hand except one. Lieutenant Notice that had not raised his hand. He was just standing there, staring at the holographic images of the swarm, his eyes moving quickly as if he was calculating something. Selected 12 of his best soldiers, including, and then he noticed. Human, he said, you did not volunteer. I was thinking, replied calmly. Laughed harshly, thinking about how to hide, probably, coward. No, said, I was thinking about how to kill them. The room went silent. Everyone turned to look at the small human with disbelief on their faces. Kill them, repeated. The hollow swarm cannot be killed. Everyone knows this. We can only contain them. Stepped forward. With respect, Commander, that is not entirely true. The swarm is made of organic matter that bonds together at a cellular level. If you can disrupt that bonding, the organisms cannot hold their shape. They fall apart. We know this, said impatiently, but nothing can disrupt their bonding. We have tried every weapon we have. You have tried every weapon you have, agreed, but you have not tried ours. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small metal container. It was about the size of a soda can, painted in dark green with Korean letters printed on the side. What is that? Demanded. On Earth, we have organisms similar to the swarm, explained. We call them slime molds. They are not as dangerous, but they work in the same way. Our scientists have studied them for many years. This container holds a chemical compound that attacks the cellular bonding of swarm-type organisms. In laboratory tests, it froze slime molds solid in less than 30 seconds. You brought an experimental weapon onto my station without permission, growled. Yes, Commander, I apologize for the deception, but I believed it might be useful someday. Met the Commander's angry eyes without flinching. I was right. For a long moment, just stared at him. Then he made a decision. Fine, you come with us. If your weapon works, you may have just saved many lives. If it does not work, you will probably die with the rest of us. Either way, we will learn something. They moved out immediately. The corridors leading to Sector 7 grew darker and colder as they approached. The walls were covered with thick black slime that seemed to move on its own. The air smelled like rotting meat. Weapons ready, ordered quietly. Stay close together. Do not let the swarm separate us. They turned a corner and found themselves facing a wall of darkness. The swarm sensed them immediately. It moved toward them like a wave, flowing across the floor and walls and ceiling, surrounding them from all sides. Could see faces in the darkness, the faces of soldiers who had already been consumed, their mouths open in silent screams. Fire shouted. The soldiers opened fire with their plasma weapons. Bright orange bolts tore into the swarm, but instead of harming it, the creature absorbed the energy. It grew larger. It moved faster. A soldier screamed as a tendril of darkness wrapped around his leg and pulled him into the mass. Another soldier tried to save him but was consumed as well. Fired and fired, but his shots did nothing. "Fall back," commanded. "Everyone fall back." But did not fall back. He walked forward, toward the swarm, as calmly as if he was taking a walk in a park. He held the small container in his hand. "Human, what are you doing?" shouted. "You will die." Did not answer. He pulled the pin on the container and threw it directly into the center of the swarm. For one terrible second, nothing happened. Then the container exploded, releasing a fine white mist that spread through the air like fog. The moment the mist touched the swarm, something amazing happened. The creature stopped moving. Its surface began to harden, turning from liquid black to solid gray. The faces frozen in the darkness stopped screaming. The tendrils reaching toward the soldiers froze in place. In 30 seconds, it was over. The entire swarm had transformed into a field of gray crystals that glittered in the dim light like strange, beautiful statues. The soldiers stared in shock. "Impossible," whispered. Turned around. His face was calm, but his eyes were hard. "We need to keep moving. There might be more of them ahead, and the trapped soldiers are running out of time." He picked up a plasma rifle from a fallen soldier and checked its power level. His movements were smooth and professional, completely different from the clumsy trainee they had mocked for 3 weeks. Watched him with new eyes. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. Looked at him. "Right now, Commander, I am the person who is going to save your soldiers. We can discuss everything else later." He turned and walked into the darkness without waiting for a response. After a moment of hesitation, the others followed. Behind them, the frozen swarm stood silent and still, a monument to the power of the creature that the galaxy had underestimated. A human. The rescue mission was a complete success. Led the team through 3 more encounters with the swarm. Each time, he moved with confidence and precision, directing the soldiers like a general commanding an army. He used 2 more canisters of his chemical weapon, and each time the swarm was frozen solid within seconds. When they finally reached the trapped soldiers in the supply room, they found 28 survivors out of the original 36. The survivors stared at with confusion and amazement. They had heard stories about the weak human who failed every training test. This man did not match those stories at all. By the time they returned to the main section of the station, word had spread. Soldiers lined the corridors to watch them pass. They whispered to each other, pointing at the small human who walked beside Commander. The next morning was summoned to the medical bay. His wounds from the mission were minor, but had insisted that all team members be examined. Knew that the examination was not really about wounds. It was about getting answers. He was not surprised when Commander and Lieutenant entered the room and closed the door behind them. "We need to talk," said. His voice was different now. The contempt was gone, replaced by something more careful, more respectful. Sat on the medical bed and waited. "Your file says you are a civilian consultant," continued. "It says you have basic military training but no combat experience. It says you volunteered for this program to help improve relations between Earth and the Coalition." "That is what the file says," agreed. "But that is not true, is it?" Was silent for a moment, then he sighed. "No, Commander, it is not true." Stepped forward. "I have been watching you since you arrived. Your failures in training were too perfect, too controlled. You were pretending to be weak." "Yes." "Why?" looked at both of them for a long moment. Then he made a decision. The mask he had worn for 3 weeks fell away. His posture changed. His eyes hardened. He was no longer the gentle, polite trainee who accepted every insult with a smile. He was something else entirely. "My real name is Captain Park," he said. "I served in the Korean Special Warfare Command for 15 years. After that, I was recruited into the United Defense Command, Black Operations Division. I have fought in jungles, deserts, mountains, and oceans. I have survived conditions that would kill most creatures in this galaxy." He paused. "I was sent here by Earth's military leadership. My mission was simple: watch, learn, report." "Report what?" demanded. "The truth about the Coalition," replied. "Humanity is new to galactic politics. We do not know if we are joining an alliance of equals or if we are walking into a trap. We needed to know how the Coalition treats its weaker members. We needed to know if your people were honorable or if they were just bullies who only respect strength." Scales flushed with color. It was a sign of embarrassment. "And what did you find?" Looked at her directly. "I found both. I found soldiers like Chitter who showed kindness to a stranger. I found leaders like Commander who speak harshly but ultimately care about their people." He turned his gaze to the door as if looking through it at someone beyond. "And I found soldiers like who take pleasure in crushing anyone they see as weak." Was quiet for a moment. "You let us insult you, mock you, treat you like dirt for 3 weeks. Why did you not fight back?" "Because fighting back would have proved nothing," said. "Any creature can fight when it is cornered. But it takes true strength to remain calm when others try to break you. It takes discipline to wait for the right moment instead of reacting with anger." He stood up from the medical bed, for the first time, and saw him clearly. He was not tall. He was not muscular by standards. But there was something in the way he held himself that demanded attention, something dangerous. "Humans evolved on a death world," continued. "Our planet has tried to kill us since the day we first appeared. We have apex predators that hunt us for food. We have natural disasters that destroy entire cities. We have diseases that mutate faster than we can cure them. We have survived ice ages, supervolcanoes, and asteroid impacts that wiped out species much older than us." He looked at "They are strong, stronger than humans in almost every physical way, but strength is not everything. Humans survive because we adapt, we learn, we endure. We do not give up no matter how hopeless things seem." "And the weapon you brought," said, "the chemical that froze the swarm, was that adaptation?" "Yes," said. "Earth scientists have been studying swarm organisms for over a century. When we learned about the hollow swarm from Coalition databases, we immediately began developing countermeasures. That canister was the result of 3 years of research." "You developed a weapon against the swarm in 3 years," sounded incredulous. "We have been fighting them for centuries. We never came close to finding a way to stop them." "Because you approached the problem as warriors," said. "You looked for ways to fight them with strength. Humans approached it as scientists. We looked for ways to fight them with knowledge." There was a long silence, and exchanged glances. "The Galactic Council will want to speak with you," finally said. "They will have many questions about Earth's deception. There may be consequences." "I understand," said. "I will answer for my actions. But I hope the Council will also understand why we did what we did. Humanity has been burned before by allies who seemed friendly but turned out to be enemies. We needed to know the truth before we committed ourselves to the Coalition." Stepped closer to him. Her expression was difficult to read. "You could have told us from the beginning. You could have shown us your true strength. Why did you choose to hide?" Smiled slightly. "Because I wanted to see how you treated people who had no strength. Anyone can be kind to the powerful. True character is revealed in how you treat the weak." Was silent for a moment. Then she did something that surprised everyone, including herself. She bowed her head, just slightly. It was a gesture of respect that rarely showed to anyone outside their own species. Then perhaps, she said quietly, we failed your test more than you failed ours. Nodded, perhaps, but failure is not the end. It is the beginning of learning. That is another thing humans believe. He walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back at them. I hope that the coalition and humanity can become true allies someday, he said. Not because we need each other, but because we respect each other. I have seen enough in these 3 weeks to believe that such a future is possible. He opened the door and walked out, leaving Commander and Lieutenant alone with their thoughts. Neither of them said anything for a long time. The Galactic Council chamber was the largest room had ever seen. It was shaped like a massive dome, with seats rising in circles around a central platform. Representatives from 17 different species sat in those seats, their strange eyes all focused on the small human standing alone in the center. Stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his posture straight and calm. He wore his Earth military uniform for the first time since arriving at the station. The medals on his chest reflected the bright lights above. Behind him, sitting in the observer section, were Commander, Lieutenant, and Chitter. They had insisted on attending, though did not know why. The High Speaker, an ancient creature that looked like a floating cloud of blue light, spoke first. Captain Park of Earth, you stand before this council accused of deception, espionage, and smuggling illegal weapons onto a coalition military facility. How do you respond? Before could answer, Earth's ambassador stood up from her seat. Ambassador Shin was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had been a diplomat for over 40 years and had negotiated with some of the most dangerous governments on Earth. The aliens of the coalition did not scare her. With respect, High Speaker, she said, humanity rejects these accusations. Captain Park was not a spy, he was an observer. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Several representatives shouted that there was no difference. Others demanded punishment for Earth's insult. Waited for the noise to die down before continuing. When humanity first made contact with the coalition, we were treated with contempt. Your representatives told us we were primitive, violent, unworthy of a seat at the galactic table. You demanded that we prove ourselves before you would consider us equals. She looked around the chamber slowly. So we sent you our best. Captain Park is one of the finest soldiers Earth has ever produced. We could have sent him openly with his full records, and perhaps you would have treated him with respect because you knew he was strong. But we wanted to know the truth. The truth about what? The High Speaker asked. The truth about your character, replied. How you treat those you see as weak. How you treat those who have no power to fight back. Because that, High Speaker, is the true measure of any civilization. Silence fell over the chamber. Then Commander stood up. Permission to address the council, he said. The High Speaker's light flickered. Granted, Commander. Walked down to the central platform and stood beside. The human looked tiny next to the massive, but somehow they seemed equal. I have fought for this coalition for 60 cycles, said. His voice was heavy but firm. I have led armies against the Swarm, the Dominion, and 100 other threats. I have watched good soldiers die in my arms. I have killed more enemies than I can count. I know warriors. He turned and looked at. And I tell you now, members of this council, this human is a warrior, perhaps the finest I have ever seen. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the chamber. Not because of his body, continued. Physically, he is nothing compared to his muscles are weak, his skin is soft. He has no claws, no scales, no natural weapons. By every measure we use to judge strength, he should be worthless. He paused, but we were wrong about what strength means. Turned to face the council fully. For 3 weeks I watched my soldiers insult this man, mock him, humiliate him. They called him weak, stupid, worthless. They told him to go home. They treated him like garbage. And through it all, he never lost his temper. He never complained. He accepted every insult with grace and continued trying to do his best. His voice grew stronger. And when the crisis came, when the hollow swarm was loose and my soldiers were dying, this so-called weak human walked into the darkness with nothing but a small canister. He saved 36 lives. He succeeded where all our strength and all our weapons failed. Looked back at, that is not weakness. That is strength of a kind I did not know existed, strength of will, strength of character, strength of spirit. He bowed his massive head. It was the deepest bow could give, a gesture of absolute respect. Earth has earned its place in this coalition, declared, and Captain Park has earned my respect. Whatever this council decides, that will not change. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Lieutenant stood up. I support Commander, she said simply. Chitter stood up as well, his antennae trembling with nervousness. I also support the human, he said in his clicking voice. He showed me kindness when no one else would. That means something. One by one, other soldiers who had witnessed the rescue stood up in support. The council watched in amazement as nearly 50 warriors, from 6 different species, stood to honor a single human. The High Speaker's light pulsed slowly as it processed what was happening. Finally, it spoke. It seems that Captain Park has made quite an impression. The council will take a short recess to discuss this matter. 30 minutes later, the council returned with their decision. Earth will not face punishment for this incident, the High Speaker announced. Instead, we recognize that humanity's concerns about the coalition were valid. We have not always treated new species fairly. Perhaps it is time for that to change. The chamber was silent as the High Speaker continued. Furthermore, Captain Park is offered a position in the Coalition Strategic Command. His skills in leadership and tactics have been proven beyond doubt. If he accepts, he will be the first human to hold such a rank. Looked at Ambassador, she nodded slightly. I accept, said. Thank you for this honor. I will do my best to deserve it. After the session ended, walked through the station corridors. Everything looked different now. Soldiers who had once laughed at him now nodded with respect. Some even saluted. He found Sergeant waiting for him near the mess hall. The looked uncomfortable. His eyes were fixed on the floor. Human, he said roughly. I came to. You came to apologize, finished. Scales flushed with embarrassment. Yes, I treated you poorly. I was wrong. You are not weak. You are, he struggled to find the words. You are not what I expected. Studied him for a moment. On Earth, we have a saying. It takes a strong person to admit when they are wrong. What you just did, Sergeant, is harder than any battle you have ever fought. Looked up surprised. I accept your apology, said, and I hope we can start again. As equals. He extended his hand, stared at it for a moment, then reached out with one of his massive hands and shook it gently. As equals, agreed. Later that night, stood at a window overlooking the stars. Lieutenant found him there, staring out at the endless darkness. What are you thinking about? She asked. The future, replied. Humanity has taken its first real steps into the galaxy. We have proven ourselves worthy, but this is just the beginning. There will be more tests, more challenges, more creatures who look at us and see only weakness. Stood beside him and looked at the stars as well, and you will prove them wrong, again and again. Perhaps, said, or perhaps we will fail. That is the nature of life, but we will never stop trying. That is what makes us human. He smiled slightly, and now the galaxy knows our secret. What secret? Turn to face her. Never underestimate a human, especially one who smiles while you mock him, because we are not waiting for you to accept us. We are not hopping for your respect. His eyes were calm and steady. We are watching, we are learning, and when the moment is right, we will show you exactly what we are capable of. Felt a shiver run down her spine. For the first time, she truly understood why humanity had survived for so long on their deadly planet. They were patient. They were relentless. And they never, ever gave up.